Welcome to the Land Investing Business Secret Podcast, where each short episode we talk about the strategies, experiences, and the tools to help you launch, grow, and scale your land business. Learn how to find freedom within your own business, find out ways to build consistency in your processes, and hear how other everyday land investors are winning so you can get to the next step closer to building your dream life through your land business. And I'm your host of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast by Pebble, Jesse Kwong. Hey, how's it going? This is Jesse here from the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast. I've got an awesome guest here. I finished recording this with him, Clayton. We got to get a good understanding of his team and the people on his team and his sales process. There's a lot here. And really, it was just all about understanding how to make deals. I felt like that's a big takeaway I got here from Clay. And you can certainly see he's put in the work to really understand how to optimize everything. You know, it's incredible. This conversation with him, I wish this would have ran a little bit longer. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode here. Pen and paper kind of an episode. Make sure you jot some notes down here. But enjoy and cheers. Hey, how's it going, everybody? I've got a special guest here. We spoke a while ago before, and I'm finally excited to have him on the show here. Clayton Hepler. How are you doing?
Jesse, man, it's good to be jamming with you here today. I'm pumped.
I feel like this is a new office here in our first conversation. I don't know what it is, but I remember our conversation very well when we first chatted, and a few things that you're working on, and I'm assuming this is a new office, so nice to see you are in a different space, I believe, but I'm not sure. But anyways, Clayton, help us understand who you are and how you got into land and your journey. I want to give everybody listening here a bit of context as to who you are.
Yeah, and you're totally right on that office thing. I loved your little neon sign in the back. I remember the first time that we met. We talked about that neon sign. I was like, man, I love that neon sign. And you sent it to me. Ended up not making it here in this office. Maybe one day it will. But that was a great little sign. I appreciate you sharing that. So yeah, I mean, I got into land out of necessity. So I am not a pure land guy, if you will. So I have been in house flipping. I've been wholesaling. I've owned apartment buildings. And so really, I'm a real estate person first. I'm a core real estate person first. So if we kind of go back a couple of years, I was trying to get into real estate. I heard all the major podcasts talking about real estate. And I got into real estate because I wanted to I was working for a family company, chocolate company, gourmet chocolate, like think about like $35, $40 a pound chocolate, really high end. We would sell it to private aviation groups. We would sell it to like the Omni hotel chain, that hotel chain, or like specialty shops and private advisors, private equity advisors, private wealth advisors. And so I was in that space and I wanted to kind of get out of the family business, right? I wanted to go and do my own thing. And I learned about real estate. And so I joined a mom and pop in Pittsburgh, the city that I grew up in. And so the guy had 300, 400 something units. And I said, hey, I want to go work for this guy, do acquisitions for him. Because I had a sales bent. My background was sales and marketing, doing the guerrilla cold calling people, trying to get in front of as many people for these private aviation companies, these hotel companies, etc. And so I learned the business from him. I learned about how to look at an apartment building, how to analyze an apartment building. And during that time, he said, hey, I wanted to kind of create a different revenue stream in my business, right? Like the cash flow for these buildings is great, but I want to figure out, hey, is there another way for us to get deal flow and also produce cash? And so I learned about wholesaling. I started that business. We did about 75 deals in our first year, flipping, wholesaling. And so I just took all the sales background that I had and I just learned about wholesaling, right? And so we were doing everything. Every marketing channel that we do today in land, we were doing back then, right? So we were a little bit ahead of the land curve, if you will. So during that time too, I said, hey, I want to start getting into real estate. I want to start buying my own building. So I bought a house hack. Then I bought another 3-unit, then a 6-unit. Then I started to scale a little bit more, took a partner on, and we scaled and bought a ton of multifamily properties. And these were 1,900 builds, man. I mean, I don't know, where the majority of the audience is, but the buildings in Pittsburgh and around that general area, they're built 120 years ago. So they have 120 years worth of problems, right? They have 120 years worth of expenses. And so we were buying these buildings and we'd fix them up, the innards of them, gut them, get them really nice, and things would come up. A new roof here, cast iron piping here, terracotta sewer line here, all this stuff that you would never have anticipated if you weren't a seasoned investor. And so these things started coming up and up and up, and we were like, man, this is a really cash intensive business. We thought we were cash flowing all this amount every month, but it ended up at the end of the month we had more money or month than money. That's what Tony Robbins says, I think, right? And so we were like, wow, we're killing it some months, and some months we aren't killing it. And then in October of or November of 2022, I get a call from my wife before before the Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, and she says, "Hey Clay," she's crying on the phone, hysterically crying. This is the middle of the day, right? And she says, "Hey Clay, I lost my job. My company's going under." And she had a six-figure salary. She was providing the income that we needed for me to continue to go out there and be the guy that was on the social media and talk about, "Hey, I'm buying all these units," when in reality, it was just a clarity that we needed to see this portfolio is not going well as we thought it was, and we need to bring some cash in. And so at that point, I was looking around. Hey, I want to do wholesaling or house flipping or something like that. And we had a house in Colorado that was also bleeding us a ton of cash because it was an Airbnb. And we said, hey, we want to eventually move here. This is where we want to move, right? And so we were in Pittsburgh at that point. We wanted to move there. And so we needed to have a business that was remote enabled. In that fall, I was looking around and I was thinking of, hey, getting into land and flirting with courses and training, but I hadn't gone all in, right? I was just sort of learning about it a little bit. And so when I got that call, I knew I needed to go all in into land. And so that was one of the craziest days of my life, man, because I was looking ahead in 2023 and I had a wedding that I had to pay for. My parents didn't have enough money to pay for a wedding. I had to float a Airbnb. I had to float our life, and it was just terrifying. But I got into land and I was terrified and I said, I got to make this shit happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can swear on this podcast, but
No, totally.
um
That's interesting. I want to touch on two things here. Number one is, we have a lot of people that listen that are, flirting with the idea of land or exploring, and they're on the fence, maybe they're skeptical, whatever it is. One thing that stood out to me is you went and joined a mom and pop team. How can somebody go about doing that? And I think that's one of the best ways to kind of learn the game here is to actually join and be of value to a team and actually learn on the go. Would you suggest that?
hmm.
I've heard that only a couple times, and it's definitely how I started in the house world as well, just kind of getting in there. And is it a good idea to sort of join up with an existing team, provide value, work under them, and learn on the go? Or would you say, no, you know what, you could totally do this on your own? And if you do, I mean, in your experience having to join that team, what did you get out of it? Did it give you confidence? I mean, what is it? Would you have been able to get to where you are without having to join that team? Because I think that is such a interesting first step, and I feel one that gets overlooked a lot of times.
Those are some really interesting questions that I've never heard them being asked because, in land, I would say if you're talking about joining a land specific team, we find that the majority of people nationally that are talking about land, they have the virtual team, right? They have the VAs that basically run their entire team, and they are not set up to bring someone on and teach them the process. If you're a wholesaling business, you see the majority of the national wholesalers, the people that teach how to wholesale, they have US based teams. That should be something that we should look at, right? As land investors, we should think, why are the majority of people in a more competitive, more sophisticated, more institutionalized market structured in this specific way? If I want to get to that type of business, shouldn't I structure my business that way? So to answer your question related to the mom and pop, I joined that team because I said, hey, I want to learn the apartment building business, right? And if you want to learn the land business doing this, I don't know if it's necessarily needed to join a mom and pop, like a shop, like your business, my business, someone else's business, because we're dealers, right? There's a lot more sophistication that is required in the purchasing, the management, the asset and the property management of a multifamily asset. I have to understand all the construction cycle. I have to understand my cash conversion cycle. I have to understand leasing costs. All these things that in land you don't really have to understand, right? You understand, is the grass green? Is there dirt there? We're buying land, right? And so I think it's a little bit different. Of course, it would be beneficial to shadow someone, but I think that provided you work with the right person to learn the business, I think that you'll have plenty of help in order to get in, and you don't need to go and shadow someone effectively
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
land business.
That's really interesting. And yeah, I get where you're coming from with that. Now, it's funny, you also mentioned, looking at the way that house has gone, being a little bit more institutionalized, a little bit more sophisticated. I'm sure you coming into land, you're sort of starting to see similar patterns. Would that be true or false in terms of running their marketing and the different channels that we're following up on and how we handle? I mean, when I started 5 years ago, I get out of 500 of these, and I get several deals done, and it was I was so spoiled back then. Like, it's not like nowadays. So, any thoughts on that? And is as sort of land trails? Does it trail the wholesaling, the house world?
Well, there's a couple of questions in there, and the core question that I hear you saying is land getting more competitive, and is it becoming too competitive? Which is the narrative that is a prevailing narrative. I think the narrative that is prevailing is because the land market is not as mature as the house flipping market. You had people in 1980, 1970 talking about, you know, I'm here with my Lamborghini in my marble house, and I'll teach you how to, flip houses, on this infomercial at 2 a.m. That is a much more mature market. Okay. And so the narrative, there was never like, is it getting more competitive? Sure, during COVID times, it got more competitive, but things get more competitive over time. Marketing inherently gets more competitive over time. Everything gets more competitive over time. I think the margins in land are still way better than the margins in houses. And I think if you're a good operator, and there are two things you need to be good at in land, right, in order to be a good operator. If you're a good operator, you will win, and you will win big. And so the narrative of it's getting too hard, I'm sending out mail and I'm not getting as much responses. Great. Then that means that people that are successful, the people that know how to build good operations and good sales teams, will be able to scale and build more profitable businesses. I don't find the competition relevant even in that discussion.
Help us understand here, what is an operator and what makes a good operator.
Yeah. So my question for you would be, if we're talking about being an operator, is how much does it cost for you to get a lead? And if you can't answer that question like that, and how much did it cost last month versus this month? Because there's going to be a difference. And what's your cash conversion cycle? Most people don't even know what a cash conversion cycle is. Cash conversion cycle can be measured, and it allows you to predictively scale your business, which means if I put $1 into marketing today, how long does it take for that dollar to turn into profit in aggregate? If it's last year when we bought a deal, it took us 99 days to sell the deal on average, right? We had some real losers, we had some real winners. It's up this year. It's up. It's up to 131 days at this point. And in 2 weeks, it's going to be different. Could be 129 days, could be 137 days. But I know when I buy a deal, I know how long it takes for me to turn that money on average into, or turn those marketing dollars into cash. It's so important to understand these numbers, because that means that I know when I invest in mail this month, and if I buy a deal, if it takes me on average 30 days to lock up a deal that comes into my system, and then on average, after I lock up a deal, it takes me 45 days to close a deal, and on average, it takes me 131 days to sell that deal. I know that it's going to take me 200 days to get a deal from when I send that marketing to when we close. And that helps you understand how to scale a business. And people are just saying, all right, Jesse, let me just log on to Pebble here today. Yeah, I'm going to shoot out some mail. I'm going to target this county. And, maybe next month I'm going to target this county. And there's no consistency. Operators understand their metrics, their KPIs. They understand that the most important thing to scale a business is consistency over long periods of time and accountability. I mean, there's so many other things there, but that's sort of those are sort of the first things that I think of when you ask me that question.
Yeah, so it sounds like those are some of the things that make a good operator. But again, for some of us who don't even know that term, what is an operator? Is it someone that runs the day to day? Is it somebody that leads the business? What do you sort of define, or how do you define an operator?
That is a great question. And I would have answered this question 6 months ago very differently than I would answer it today.
Yeah,
There is this narrative that is prevailing, and I keep using that word, but it's so true about scale out of your business. Dude, if you're not making $2 million a year, how can you scale out of your business? If you're not making $3 million a year, why are you scaling out of your business? Why are you taking you, who has the most amount of skin in the game, to close deals, to price markets, to find markets, to have conversations with investors? Why are you trying to scale out of that? What are you trying to do? So people want to no longer be an operator. They want to be like an orchestrator. They want to be like the guy that's conducting the orchestra instead of the person that's actually in there talking. Hey, did you make sure that you got your strings tightened today? Hey, did you make sure you brought the piano, right? And being on top of everyone, holding everyone else accountable. I think if you're under $1 million a year, you should have why would you scale out of your business? It doesn't make any sense. There's nothing to scale out of, right? And so an operator for me is someone that is understanding how everything in their business connects, and they hold the people, the positions, and the departments accountable to results. And that is the operator part of the business. And they also understand sometimes I need to set in to make sales calls. I understand, and I could be wrong, Jesse. You still take sales calls for Pebble,
yeah,
right? Who's going to close someone better than you about taking sales calls? Are you going to hire someone and give up 10% or 12% of the revenue? Or you might love it. You might say, I love it. And people want to just scale out of that, the most important things that they can do in their land business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. So as an operator, and this isn't something we often talk about, but I think there's huge importance here. As an operator, how can one track their performance as an operator? How do you become a better operator then? I mean, it sounds like, what is it, keeping track of the metrics you mentioned earlier? What is it that makes you a good operator, in terms of, let's say, sort of tangibles, numbers, or a way to sort of track that? Is there any way to sort of track if you're a good operator?
That's a great question. I mean, our business is built on a couple of core fundamentals. I think you can ask that question, and if someone is in a different business, they're going to say something very differently, right? Because it depends on the problem that you are solving in that business, right? We are a sales and marketing shop. And so the problem that we are solving is we need to get opportunities to come through our business like a conveyor belt, and we need to convert those opportunities. And our ability to scale, our ability to have profit is all based on our return on ad spend, right? And so you can have a couple of core metrics that you focus on. How much does it cost for me to get a lead? What's my return on my average ad spend? What's my average profit per deal? And you focus on a couple of things like that and hold yourself accountable to those. And that's saying, hey, that's the type of operations that I'm actually running. Because we're a sales and marketing business. We're not like recruiting people for headhunters, right? And so they're different. Depending on the business dictates the type of things that you should track and hold your own self accountable for, in order to be successful, and classify yourself as, I'm a successful operator.
Coming to sales and marketing, and it sounds like, again, you have a lot of background in there. You know, working with your family business, working in the house side of things, sales, marketing, some of that knowledge, what transferred over, and what does that currently look like? What does the landscape of sales and marketing look like currently for your team?
I think that there are two things that are important in the land business in order to be successful. The number one and if you focus on these two things, they take care of everything else. Number one is market selection. If you pick the correct markets, you will be successful, because you can find deals And if you find deals in a market that has a high sell-through rate, that there's a lot of potential buyers, you'll be able to sell the property. We have a parcel right now that I was texting my broker about earlier today. It's one of 24 other properties between 5 and 10 acres in this specific county. It's not selling, right? That's because it's a market that's full of other properties like that, and it's not a high sell through rate market. And so it doesn't matter how good we are at sales. If we pick the wrong markets, it's going to prevent us from having a successful business. When it comes to sales, that's the other thing that you really focus on. So if you're asking me specifically about, I'm kind of rambling here. What was your specific question?
Yeah, no. What does sales and marketing look like for you right now, yeah, or your team, or what is that sort of? How big is it? How do they, what does a day to day look like for them?
Yeah. So we have specifics. I can go to the team level, and then I can break down statuses, and then I can break down scripts. So the team level is, we have 5 people on the sales team currently, right? So we have 5 people on the sales team, 2 closers and 3 lead managers. Lead managers handle all people that, like, they're like setters and closers. Think about the standard models. I'm setting a closer up to close a deal. So depending on the actual marketing that the deal comes through, whether it's a certain marketing type versus another, like for example, a direct mail, we want our closers to be on those because those are our highest value leads. So if a direct mail lead comes in, I want my closer to get on the phone with that person right away and qualify them, right? And then we do a 2-call close. So they qualify them in an initial qualifying call, which takes anywhere between 11 to 16 minutes. And we qualify them, and then right away we book a meeting from that meeting to close. And usually we're going to try to book that meeting. That's We might be having a conversation with the seller earlier that day. We're going to try to book the meeting same day, right? In order to get comps and then call the seller back and close them on the phone. So if it's a less qualified leads, if it comes from another source like texting or some other source like that, we'll have our lead managers actually walk them through to get motivation. And then if it's a motivated lead, then we will send it to our closers, and they'll qualify it. Again, they'll kind of walk through the qualification. They will then build rapport, and then they will set up another closing call. So that's a 3-call close, because we find that cold calling leads or texting leads, they require a lot more warming up. They're not nearly as qualified. And the reason why we have lead managers on the front end, Jesse, that they actually warm this lead up or they disqualify them, is because the closers are the highest paid people. Their time is not worth a lot of these colder lead sources, right? That require adding a follow up. So did you have a
Quick,
question?
yeah,
Yeah,
quick questions. Your lead managers and your closers. Now, I'm assuming your closers have some sort of sales background. Is that right?
absolutely.
And stateside or overseas?
Stateside.
Okay. And then your lead managers, do they need sales? But what kind of background would you need to bring on a lead manager?
Okay, so we hire people that have sales backgrounds, but we do daily sales training every single morning. We do an hour of daily sales training with scripts. So every single morning we're doing, coming in, we're talking on how many deals did we pass off yesterday, how many deals did we qualify, how many deals did we close, how many deals did we get under contract, how many deals did we offer on, right? And we hold our individual team members every single day accountable to certain KPIs that they're focusing on, right? If I'm a lead manager, I need to qualify X amount of people every single week. If they do not hit that over a period of a quarter, even a month, they're out of here, right? They don't stay long, right? So we do the daily sales training. We go over all those points. After that, we go over, hey, what are our most important deals that we need to be focusing on? Do we need to have other people come in? Do I need to jump in, act as a manager, try to save a deal? Do we need to have a lead manager call this deal because they've ghosted us for 3 straight days? Do we need to send them a Loom video to try to re-engage them? All these creative ways to re-engage leads to get more leads. At the end of that call, the last 30 minutes, we're going to go through role play. Every single day, we're focusing on different parts of the script in order to perfect it, so that when we get out in the field on the day to day, these guys are sharp. And then weekly, we have weekly call reviews. So every week, for every single one of my team members, it's anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour that we're doing weekly call reviews. And so we're listening to their calls. We're focused on, hey, what could you have done better? How do you improve here? And then we hold them accountable to those results the next week when we meet. So we're very scientific about making sure that we have the highest performance of our sales team every single week. And it's dramatically increased cohesion in our sales team, and also just the flat out performance that we're doing every single day.
All right, so you're hearing how Clay here has built out his team. He's got lead managers and a couple closers and whatever you want to call them. Those team members are what's going to help him get back his time to be able to scale the business, but also do more deals and still have the available time to manage everything going on. And hiring is one of those tricky things. We went through recently just bringing on a new sales person onto our Pebble team here, and we continue to grow our team here. And it's one of the things that I talk about in what I call the Dirt Hacker Challenge. It's a 3-day session with me. We go through the framework of scaling a business. In fact, it's a framework to scale any business. It doesn't matter if you're a land investor or not. Obviously, we'll talk about it within the realms of land investing, but the framework, what I call the hack framework, and one of those pillars is knowing your team. And I talk about the hiring funnel. How do we go through and hire team members? I used to just put up a posting and just interview and maybe get them to do a test and whatnot. But there are certain things that we get into place now, an initial video submission to what we call our 90-day game plan, getting people to sign off on that. Are you hiring a generalist or a specialist like a closer? These things all matter in your hiring process. Should you be including your salary on there? Where to look to hire? So anyways, this is one of the things that I cover. I think this is on day 1 that I cover on the Dirt Hacker Challenge. There is a lot more that I cover on this, including automations, now some of the AI related stuff with, OpenAI's ChatGPT to, Gemini to Claude. And we sort of talk a lot about these different things because these are certainly becoming huge advantages if you understand these things to apply to your business. So we'll be talking about that. To the biggest one on the last day is how do we actually create processes? Because essentially at the end of the day we need processes, and not just processes but repeatable processes. How do we start there as a solopreneur? How do we go from a task list then to actual playbooks? I'm going to actually talk and walk you through all this. We've got worksheets, we've got assignments, we do it all in class. It doesn't take any time outside of that class time, so you have about 60 to 70 minutes with me every day for 3 days. I do this every single month. If you're interested in this, dirthackerchallenge.com. You'll see the next upcoming date for that. Not only that, I'll be shipping you out when you sign up things like this, the Real Land Talk book here. This is incredible. 200 hours of discussions with other land investors and the gems all reduced into this. I'll be sending you another book here as well as well as a workbook as well. So I'm going to include that all for free, giving you cover the shipping. I'll get that out to you and you sign up for the challenge. So I'll see you for the next Dirt Hacker Challenge. That's dirthackerchallenge.com. Enjoy the rest of this episode here with Clayton. All right, and this is really interesting. It's so interesting how clear your process is in terms of you do have a larger sales team than most people, I would say. Now, when you're doing that review with them, like you're doing that daily huddle or whatever you want to call it, you kind of meet and go through that for an hour. Are you literally picking on one person, you're focusing on them, or does everybody get the hot seat? How does that look like? I'm really interested here.
Are you talking about related to when we're doing script reviews on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah.
So we'll focus on one part of the script.
Okay.
So if you're a lead manager and a closer, there's a shared script and then there's a closer script. And so we'll focus on their different components within the script that we want, the opening, getting motivation, handling deal killers, setting expectations. And so we'll focus on different parts of the script, or handling roadblocks. What happens when someone says, I got to think about it? What happens when someone says, I got to talk to my spouse? What happens when we get objections like this? And we every single week focus on a specific theme, Jesse. It's like, hey, this week we're going to focus on roadblocks, like all the things that could prevent us from getting a deal done, whether that's in our initial call, whether that's in the closing call. And we'll drill on that and drill on the parts of our script that are actually focused on that.
I love that. Hey, there's something you mentioned, and I hope you guys are listening here. Clayton said, book a meeting from a meeting. That's probably one of the first lessons I learned about any sales call, demo call, whatever you want to call it. Always book a meeting from a meeting. I think For a lot of people, it might be obvious. For people like me who had no idea, the acronym was BAMFAM. That got ingrained in my head. Always book a meeting from a meeting. I think that was one that I realized how valuable that can be, because that certainly changed a lot of things for us here at Pebble too. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I wanted to highlight that. I know that might be basic for some of you guys, but those of you guys that are new, hopping on calls, talking to people, book a meeting from a meeting. Would you agree with that, Clayton? Here,
And I would even add something that I don't think I've ever shared outwardly, but when we book a meeting from a meeting, we will be on the phone with the seller and we will confirm it 3 or 4 times. Then we will manually put them in a Calendly invite, manually add their email, manually add their phone number, manually make sure that there's notifications that they get set a day before, 5 hours before, whatever it is, an hour before, so that they are not missing that call. And so we're doing all this stuff to increase our show rates, because one of the things that kills a sales organization is not performance; it's having conversations with sellers. We got to have conversations with sellers in order to close deals. And so if we can increase our ability to do that, that increases our ability and likelihood to close more deals.
wow, Clayton, I love it. So we talked about a little bit about your. So here you are. What I'm envisioning here is you're sort of stringing a lot of things together for your team, looking for weak spots to reinforce, to review. You're giving your thoughts on things. Do your salespeople also, are they allowed to contribute ideas? Are they allowed to toss ideas with you guys? And do you guys sort of have that cohesion to kind of marinate and build ideas together in terms of scripts and how to continue to do what you got to do on calls?
Absolutely. One of our core values is radical adaptability. And so if there's something that one of the sales members says, hey, when we ask this question, the seller won't answer it. Like a lot of times when you ask people the question of what has you thinking about selling? Why are we having this conversation? People are going to throw up a smokescreen. You know it, right? You do this every day. And so, how do we create, craft, and frame these questions on our calls in order to increase our likelihood of getting the information that we need in order to perfect our sales process? So we are on a daily basis improving our sales script. And for example, 2 days ago, one of my sales guys was like tolling over the weekend of, I think this could help us frame the call at the beginning of the call better for our qualification script. And he went through and spent like 2 hours like improving our script. And I looked at it, I was like, man, there's some really good stuff in here. Let's try this out for 2 weeks. So I'm super open. I honestly want people to tell me, hey, you're screwing up, you got to improve here, or whatever they think. I welcome it with open arms, because there's so many things that I don't see, right? I'm not always on. I'm not dialing 90 people a day. I'm not having a lot of these conversations. I'm listening to the calls, and sometimes I'll jump in when it's a bigger deal, but I'm not doing it day to day. And so there's a blind spot there. So I welcome that. That's a really great question, and I encourage that sort of feedback in our organization.
Yeah, no, I love that. And yeah, that I find getting feedback from the team can be a little bit tricky sometimes when you want them to be as open and honest about feedback too. So I'm glad that that seems to be a part of what you guys are doing, and I'm glad we could sort of talk about that now. Clayton, let's switch gears here. Let's talk about a recent deal. Walk us through from marketing to some of the challenges you had to work through and some of the lessons you took away from it, and where are you currently with that deal? So do you have any deals in mind that you can sort of walk us through?
I do. I do have a good one, actually. I
Yeah,
just thought of
please.
it when we were talking about it before the call. So we are purchasing a property that is in a very unusual shape. It sort of sits at these interchange. It's like a upside down pie piece. It's 13 acres. Okay, and so we looked at this track in November, and the guy was asking for 10,000 an acre. And we said, man, we can't pay 10,000 an acre for this. And it was from one of the person that was previously in my organization. He's no longer with us. And so we ended up saying, hey, we can't do that. We can give you 5,000. And he said, absolutely not. There's absolutely no way. And we have a pretty rigorous follow-up process. And about 2 months ago, he came back up in our system. And we're reaching out, and one of my other sales guys said, "Hey man, like these comps that this other guy pulled, and it's partially my fault. I should have triple checked, but these comps were not, I don't think they're the right comps. I really don't think they're the right comps." He's like, "I think we're probably closer to like 25 an acre or maybe 30 an acre." I said, "Tell me more." So when we went to analyze this property, we asked the real estate broker to go out and see the property because we were like, it's kind of a weird shape. I'm not really sure. And seemed to be like a road behind it. This road was a railroad. And so we're like, oh man, if there's a railroad behind this property, it's going to affect the value. But we got to call the railroad company to see if this railroad is dormant or if it's active. And so we call the railroad company, and this railroad company is what you'd imagine an old railroad company would be. No one's picking up, no one's connecting. It takes us like 5 days to get a hold of someone. The guy that's the right guy is texting me on his personal phone number. And eventually, after a couple of weeks, we get down to the bottom of it. It's like, this is a dormant railroad. And so we get this thing under contract. And we get it under contract for, we thought it was 16 acres. And we get it under contract for 160,000, 10,000 an acre. And right. What he originally asked for. We got it under what he originally asked for. And then he tells us like 3 weeks in that, hey, I don't think it's 16 acres. I think it's 13 acres, actually. We finished up the survey, and it's actually 13 acres. And he was putting a fuss. He's like, but you still owe us 160,000. And I said, I had to call him up personally. I didn't want my sales guy to do this. I said, listen, I completely understand that we committed to this number, but it's not fair to our original agreement that was 10,000 an acre to put this from at the 160 when in reality it's 130. So after going back and forth, because I mean it's still a killer deal. We're like, it's still going to make 20,000 an acre, right, or 25,000 an acre, depending on how we cut it up. He eventually gives in and signs the addendum, and so. And then we find the surveyor, the same surveyor that was going to survey the parcel. So the guy that originally surveyed, like I said, that was going to do 16 acres, but he actually did 13 acres. And this guy is like an old surveyor. Those that know the business, they know these surveyors that are in rural America. These guys don't pick up their phones. They don't text. It's like they don't exist. And so we're talking. I'm trying to get a hold of the surveyor, and the owner is like, "Hey, just call the surveyor. He's picking up the phone." His son was getting married, and so we're like getting down to the wire here. I'm like, dude, I gotta know, like, I have to see the actual plat. Like, is it 13 acres? Is it 3 acres? Like, I haven't seen the plat, and the county has no record of the plat. And so we're getting down a week before the closing. This guy's apparently has his son's wedding, and he's not answering our calls. And so we're trying to perk test this lot, right? So we can subdivide it because the county requires a certain amount of perking of each lot if we subdivide it under a certain acreage increment, right? You know those deals. And so I'm trying to get a hold of this guy. I'm sending him mail. I'm sending him Federal Express mail. I'm like skip tracing his email. I'm calling him. Finally, the day after his wedding, which is 3 days, we were basically going to cancel this deal. We're like, this is a great deal, okay? But we have to cancel this deal because the title company is not going to insure title because the plat is so old, and so they can't verify the because this plat is so old, they can't verify it. They can't offer title insurance on it. Some title insurance companies will not offer title insurance on it because there's like, how can I offer title insurance on this thing that's got an 80-year-old plat? I don't actually understand the dimensions of where it's living. So we're calling this guy. Eventually, we talk to him. He sends us over the plat map. We send out the perk test person, and all along the way, Jesse, I'm like talking to the perk test person. I'm saying, hey, give us like another week. Like, we're trying to get a hold of this guy because they had to perk test the places where the guy surveyed. Not like they had to get that because they couldn't just go out to a piece of raw dirt. They had to know where we should perk it because we're going to try to subdivide this thing. So it's all these messes moving around, trying to figure it out. And eventually we got it all together. And we're closing in like 2 days. We had to push it out a little bit because we got to get our perk test guys out there. We're closing in like 2 days, and it's going to be a killer deal, man. It's going to be an awesome deal. But that's land investing right there. If you want to get land investing, that's land investing. Putting all these things, putting my hat on, this hat on, putting this hat on, calling this person, doing this, connecting it all together. The profits, as you see, are massive. I mean, this is going to be a six-figure deal for us. But what it takes to get there, some people are unwilling to do. Some people would have said, "Oh, there's a railroad behind it, the deal's dead," or "Oh, like I can't get a hold of this guy, the deal's dead." Whatever it is, and so you have to push through those barriers, being in the land investing business, in order to really make these deals work.
I think this story you just told us really encompasses what you said earlier, and you kind of changed my perspective, or added a different perspective to running a land business. You called them deal makers, or we're dealers, and it really feels like this was what you're trying to make happen, a deal at the end of the day. And funny enough, I never use that kind of terminology that we're making deals. I mean, yeah, we do deals, but like the way you said it earlier, I think that rings really true. And I could sort of see you in action here, trying to do everything to push this deal across the line, and really be a deal maker at the end of the day. There was so many things that you came up against. Now, any sort of big takeaways from this that you think listeners here should know about, or lessons that came out of this? I mean, the big one here is it seems like to really not to give up on some of these, perhaps potential red flags or walls, and you just sort of continue to dig through it. I mean, would you say that's probably the biggest takeaway with this one here?
I would say that's a big takeaway, and also I would say that due diligence is not just checking floodplain, wetlands, and FEMA or contour lines. Due diligence goes beyond that. If we would have purchased a lot that basically had a railroad behind it, we could probably still sell it. It would sell for less. If we couldn't get title insurance on it, are we going to buy that? Absolutely not. And so, if you have an opportunity on the line, it's our responsibility as land investors to close that deal. I think that you have to be borrowing a language from, I forget who talks about this, but some major guru talks about this. Violence is the answer. Sometimes getting shit done, making it happen. This deal is a six-figure deal, guys. That is like, some people that sets their life up for a year. And so it's our responsibility to do that, right? To make it happen, to choose violence, to push through the walls, to make sure that I'm gonna exercise everything that I can do in order to make this deal happen.
I love that. I got a couple more questions here. Clayton, you're very engaging to talk to, and I could sit here and continue to record this with you, but we do have to wrap it up. One question here. First question: can you walk us through a failed deal? A failed deal here, the one that stands out, because I think we get a chance to just hear all these slam dunks, and it's like there's a reality to this. Like there really is, and I won't ever sugarcoat. I think somebody came on the show here. Was it Andrew Haney or somebody said, "Land is not a unicorn business. It's just like any business out there, and there are going to be ebbs and flows." So, can you walk us through really quickly here, maybe something that stood out, or a deal that stood out as a complete failure, flopped? Anything come to mind?
Oh, absolutely. But let me just piggyback on Andrew. I don't know Andrew. Sounds like a smart guy. Um, the, we believe that the answer to our problems are greener pastures. And land investing is an incredible business, but it requires hard work. It really is difficult. The reason why it's difficult is because sometimes deals takes longer to sell. Sometimes due diligence falls out of contract. Sometimes a thing, the $100,000 deal that you thought was going to close or was going to be $100,000, only actually makes you $50,000, and you're like, man, I was counting on that money to continue to have my consistent marketing. It is so important to have other forms of income, especially when you're starting. I started this business and I had no other forms of income. It was the most stressful year of my life. It was cripplingly stressful. I had to duct tape a plane on the way down, and it was brutal. And so anyone that's thinking about getting into this business, I implore you to make sure that you have ample cash reserves. you work with the right person to get into the business, and most importantly, you have a stable income so that when you're building your business, you don't have to pull money out like I had to do. I had to pull money out and keep going, pull money out and keep going. And it really made it so that my year was absolutely brutal. And so that's one thing I just want to leave with the listeners with, Jesse. I know that's not really necessarily answering the question, but it's super important. Don't believe all the hype of the gurus. It does take work. Number two, I bought a deal and I still own this deal. There you go. End of the conversation. So I trusted a real estate broker that he said that in this specific area, there, if the lot doesn't perk, it doesn't matter. You can put a non-engineered septic system on it or an engineered septic system. For those that don't know, there are two types of septic systems. Number one, conventional. Number two, engineered. Engineered is when the dirt doesn't perk for a conventional system, and it's sort of an adjusted, more expensive, more engineered system. And this county doesn't allow for engineered systems.
Oh, shoot.
So I bought this thing for six figures. I'm not going to go into the numbers. And it's just sitting there.
There you go. Hey, I appreciate you being so candid with that. Clayton, it's been awesome chatting with you. And to be honest, for those of you guys who are listening, I'm finally getting a chance here to catch up with Clayton. So it's been a long while. And Clayton, how can people engage with you? How can people find you? I found your X, and I was reading through it prior to this, doing a little bit of research about you again. And you're on there. Not a lot of people are hanging out there. But yeah, where can people engage you? How can people find you? How can people learn a little bit more about you and what you're doing with land?
Dude, you're like one of the only people that say X. Like I still say Twitter, but good to you. You're obviously a techie guy because I'm still like calling it Twitter. I'm very active on X, Clay Hepler. I'm relatively active on Instagram, and LinkedIn. Those are sort of the three socials. If you want to learn, yeah, it's just Clay Hepler. Um, Yep, just Clay Hepler, on all those, and I'm sure those will be in the show notes too, and I could provide that to you, Jesse. And then if you want to learn a little bit more about, hey, interested in building a land investment business, I have a podcast, a newsletter, Landman, and my website is land-man. If you want to learn about really scaling and building a land flipping business.
I remember one of our early conversations. I was like, man, you came up with Landman. That sounds awesome. I thought that was such a memorable name, as short as it is. So definitely, you guys can check out Landman. I'll add that to the show notes. Clayton, I feel like you have something else.
I want to say one thing. I want to say this is important because I made a mistake in my life to not properly attribute things to the right attribution. A landman is, I didn't make that shit up. It comes direct. So my father is from Midland, Texas. Do you know what a landman is?
You explained it to me that first.
Great. Well, let me
let the
your
listeners
audience
know.
so they get it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I know we're going over time, but okay. So my father-in-law is from Midland, Texas, and he grew up in an era that it was just tumbleweeds and ranches. I mean, it was tumbleweeds and ranches. That was it. And Midland, Texas is in an oil play that's called the Permian River Basin. The Permian River Basin is one of the largest oil deposits in the world. And it's in West Texas, that whole area. West Texas down, all the way down El Paso, I think. Don't really know my Texas geography that well. But the people that walked and went out and talked to these landowners were landmen. I mean, they're called landmen even if you're a woman. So there's no sexism here. So that is the people that would go out and negotiate these opportunities and find these incredible pieces of land. And they did it with Marcellus Shale. They did it oil all over the world. And those are landmen. And that is the etymology of landman.
How fitting. Hey, Clayton, it's been awesome connecting with you. I'm glad to hear you're doing well and glad to have you on the show here. Anyways, all you guys listening, make sure you check out the show notes here. You can watch this on YouTube and wherever you sort of consume your podcast. But Clayton, thanks again for coming on to the show here and hope to chat to you soon again.
Thank you for having me, man.
Cheers. Before you stop this episode or hit the next episode, I want to personally thank you for listening to this episode of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast by Pebble. If you found this helpful, we'd greatly appreciate any awesome reviews and ratings on whichever platform you are listening to this on. And if you have 2 minutes and wanted to step it up even more and help others, feel free to share this in other Facebook groups or pages or any communities, giving others a heads up of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast or the specific episode that may help them on their land investing journey. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and catch you on our next episode.